my Aries risings. Welcome to your December astrology forecast. My name is Kayla, Kmoney, YUNGKALEZZZ. The December predictions drop is available on my website. It is a PDF with about 30 very practical, realistic predictions for the month of December for your sign, as well as each of the 2026 full-fledged, full-year breakdown astrological transit prediction PDF as well for each of the rising signs. That I believe is, I forgot how many pages it is, but it was very meaty. I spent a lot of time making it. It was fun. It includes every major transit of 2026, along with 10, again, very practical, realistic predictions of how things will physically manifest for you in your real world. So those are available on my website. Without further ado, let's get into the December forecast. Now, just remember, I am using the whole sign house system with a 0-degree Aries ascendant. So this isn't going to be entirely supplemental to a personal natal chart reading, as this is just based off of what areas of the chart are being activated rather than your personal placements. If you would like a personal reading, you can also book one at Kmoney.biz. So for the month of December, we are seeing things continuing to move through the upper hemisphere of your chart, meaning that it may feel like the world has kind of reopened up to you compared to the previous last few weeks. We'll say like October, even a little bit of November. We have some major endings happening as well as new beginnings on the axis of your chart that has a lot to do with your mindset and your perspective, traveling, speaking, self-expression, really what is most familiar to you versus what is very foreign to you, and finding the balance between the two. So we really kick off the month on the 4th with a full moon in Gemini at 13 degrees. This is going to be in that third house of speaking, talking, writing, using your voice, self-expression, communication, all of that. So this is actually going to be a full moon, full closure, wrapping up of loose ends sort of moment that dates back to about 6 months ago. So I want you to think back to the very end of May. I believe it was May 27th that we had a new moon in Gemini. So over the span of the last 6 months, you've been having a new beginning, a seed being planted in that third house of expressing yourself more, communicating differently, perhaps starting new habits, routines, things in your very familiar day-to-day. Things that are so familiar to you that they are nearly involuntary. This is also close friends, it's siblings, it's how you get around, it's transportation, it's your car, it's taking short trips, it's traveling for work, it's reading more, it's writing more, it's the content that you consume and create. So if there was something that you started back then, whether it was a book or a passion project on social media, or you made a new friend, or you decided to start setting different boundaries in your communication with other people, you're likely seeing a full circle moment with that. Now, endings don't always have to be bad. They can just be a culmination point of something kind of coming full circle, and what began then is now reaching its final point. But that will be at 13 degrees, which is an Aries degree, and Aries is ruled by Mars. So this is about confrontation, aggression, independence, your ego. This full moon is also going to be squaring the nodes that are also in the mutable signs of Virgo and Pisces. So there could be something having to do in relation to your health as well, because this is going to be talking about the axis of health, wellness, how you take care of yourself, work, employment, your pets, being of service to other people, your lifestyle, your day-to-day habits and routines. Again, kind of a callback to the third house of perhaps things changing in your everyday life and the variables of those things shifting around a little bit. And then that being in correlation to perhaps your mental health or what you are feeling and experiencing internally, psychologically, therapeutically. The ruler of this full moon is also going to be Mercury, which is currently in your 8th house. So there could even be a nod to things that are a little bit more taboo, psychological, deep, intense, cathartic, transformative, meaning that this could have something to do with facing fears or with pushing boundaries in your communication, with, getting outside of your typical parameters. Anything that's allowing you to sort of confront truth in a very direct way, perhaps an aggressive way. I think for some people this will look like ripping the Band-Aid off, especially because with that Sagittarius influence and Mars and Sagittarius being very confrontational, direct, assertive, all of that. We might sort of see a harshness or a bluntness in the way that we are choosing to communicate, but it is likely necessary and needs to be done, and could even perhaps be long overdue. On the 6th, Mercury and Scorpio is going to trine Jupiter in Cancer. So this is between your 4th and your 8th house. This could be quite intuitive for you and does give a nod to, expansion in your communication. Again, in the way that you're thinking, the ideas that you have, the feelings that you're experiencing internally. Between the 4th and the 8th houses, these are quite psychic areas of the chart. So yes, we're talking about themes of home, family, living situation, private life, what's really going on behind closed doors, perhaps what's going on in the home. Perhaps this has something to do with familial themes, because especially with us getting around the holidays and things having to do with like transactions, money, trust, where you end and others begin in correlation to that 8th house. Trines are usually going to be supportive aspects, but sometimes it can be a nod to energy that's so easy flowing that it almost gets overlooked or taken advantage of, or kind of brushed over, glossed over. But this is a really great time to actually focus on manifesting, on getting to the root of more intimate, taboo, psychological matters with communicating your feelings. And you might even start to feel this sort of opening up to intimacy, to depth, to, I don't want to use the word transactional because I think there's a negative connotation around it being a bad thing when something is transactional, but rather like give and take. You know, this rather less than a tug of war, more of like a seesaw where you are working with someone, having that nice sort of relationship that we're seeing between Mercury and Jupiter. Mercury is things like speaking, talking, writing, communication, all of that, your thoughts, your ideas, and Jupiter is very expansive. It has a lot to do with your perspective, your mindset. So there could even be an open-mindedness to understanding, to reconciliation, to forgiving, to moving on. And if it's not in relation to another person, you might actually just see something practically working out in your favor, having to do with finances, real estate, home matters, anything sort of showing the glue that can be in relation to your home, your family, your private life, your roots, your ancestry as well. And then things where you overlap with other people and share something with them, whether that be transactionally, via trust, via intimacy, etc. On the 8th, Mars in Sagittarius in your 9th house is going to square Saturn and Pisces in your 12th house. So this can be a little bit contradictory to what we just discussed, because this can actually show a little tension or a little bit of conflict between your mindset, your perspective, the way that you're seeing or viewing something. So this is a day that you want to be mindful of if you are experiencing any sort of self-sabotage, or where perhaps any sort of psychological thing in your subconscious bumping around and your mind is kind of getting in your own way or preventing you from seeing the bigger picture, the bigger vision, there being some sort of limitation or restriction on your ability to have access to a larger outcome or to opportunity or to something that allows you to sort of get beyond your typical parameters. Mars in Sagittarius really, especially through the 9th house, needs a lot of freedom and needs a lot of room to explore and to ask questions and to be curious and to spread its wings. So to see that sort of conflicting point with Saturn being quite restrictive in the area of the chart concerning your psychology, your spirituality, your faith, things that are going on in the mind, I would assume that your largest roadblock here might be yourself, might be something in regards to the way that you're looking, feeling, or interpreting something. So try to be a little bit open-minded on this day. Otherwise, for some people, this can be legal matters. This could be things having to do with places of isolation. So this could even be like an issue happening with like a doctor, with a hospital, or something legally dealing with like perhaps a family member in jail or in prison. This could be having some mental health issues right now and you end up going to an institution or going somewhere where you are isolated, and this kind of restricting your ability to the outside world as well. That can be more of a specific practical outcome, but this is likely the parameters of the mind feeling a little bit tightened on this day. On the 10th, Neptune is going to station direct in Pisces in your 12th house, so it's been retrograde for quite some time, and you might actually feel that a veil is being lifted. So just 2 days after that restrictive transit, having Neptune station direct, there might be some sort of wake-up call or revelation or epiphany or better understanding that happens psychologically, where you sort of have a mental breakthrough that allows you to sort of see things that might have been hindering you or confusing you, creating some sort of blurred lines or boundaries over the last few months in relation to, again, your mental health, your psychology, the way that you're thinking and perceiving things internally, starting to become a lot more clear. On that same day, Mercury in Scorpio in your 8th house is going to oppose Uranus and Taurus in your 2nd house. So this is an important transit because it's quite disruptive across the board for everybody. Uranus, Mercury is usually going to be shocks, revelations. This is going to be sometimes like transportation accidents. This can be when all the apps shut down and technology gets a little bit fluky, because Mercury rules, anything regarding technology, communication, getting from point A to point B. So to have such a disruptive planet sort of shake the table and bring in this sense of uncertainty or unpredictability or this very unorthodox, fluky, almost accidental sort of energy. Of course, for some people, this can be like a surprise. This can be something that's shocking news that's actually working in your favor. It doesn't have to be inherently bad. However, for additional context, if you look back previously to around Halloween and then even to the 18th and 19th of November, whatever was going on for you then might sort of play into the relevance of what is happening now as we get towards the middle of December, because this is the third pass of the transit that we're having. So the first one we had was around around Halloween, and then it went retrograde. So we had a second pass of it around the 18th and 19th of November, and now we are having that third and final pass on December 10th. So if you need to travel, or if you need to have like a stable conversation with someone, didn't want it to go very smoothly, anything like that, this isn't the best day to do it. Not because something super awful is going to happen to you, but rather because there's just a very disruptive, unstable energy in the air. So if you can avoid it, that would probably work better in your best interest. On the 11th, Mercury is then going to ingress into your Sagittarius ninth house. So again, kind of inviting in this more open-minded nature. You might start to see an inclination towards being a little bit more philosophical, towards questioning why you believe what you believe and where you started believing it from, the root of it, being a little bit more curious, exploring things spirituality wise, or even religiously, or just in terms of like understanding the world and how it works. So this is like a lot of subjectivity in this area of the chart in terms of the way that you view life based off of your lived experiences and the wisdom that you gain through it. This can also have something to do with education, traveling, faith, philosophy, learning, mentorship, anything legal, anything having to do with justice, ethics, opinions, and perspectives. So we can kind of see how that overlaps with things like religion and spirituality being this collection of values or ethics on a larger scale, and how this area of the chart also rules things like publishing and using your voice and writing and public speaking and podcasting, because it's the output of sharing your opinions and your perspectives. So there's likely going to be some stimulation in terms of your opportunities to do those things as we get towards the middle of December, and you'll be able to enjoy that for about a month. On the 15th of December, Mars is going to ingress into your 10th house, so you're definitely going to be feeling what is this professional lock-in of things getting maybe a little bit more frustrating or a little bit more jumpy, like this fast-paced sort of catalytic energy through your career sector. But this can also point to getting a lot of things done. It can look like being very productive or being very assertive in the workplace, or having your heart set on something and relentlessly pursuing that desire. So there can be a lot of authoritative energy around genuinely just seeing that formula of hard work paying off in a very literal way. Mars in Capricorn is very determined. It's very ruthless in its pursuit to kind of establish itself. So this is usually going to be exciting in terms of your professional accomplishments. However, at the very worst, there could be some competition in the workplace. There can be some frustrations with authority figures. There can be a feeling that there's just a lot of pressure on you, or that you're having to do a lot of once, or things are moving very quickly, or some frustration with general practical things. But overall, this is usually a time outside of the career as well, where someone might start to feel a little bit more confident, a little bit more vivacious and determined to kind of make what they want come to life, sort of make it happen. On the, or same day actually, on the 15th, Mercury shadow is also going to end. So it's Mercury retrograde period that's been happening since the second half of November through December is now completely out of the shadow period, meaning that anything Mercury related, speaking, talking, writing, communication, traveling, transportation, connecting all of those dots that might have been a little bit more confusing or out of whack or a little bit frustrating this last few weeks. So again, through that 8th house of things having to be more transactional, things with trust, intimacy, secrets, other people, sex, transformation, letting go, even practical matters around more complicated finances, as well as things having to do with traveling, faith, philosophy, education, your perspective, using your voice, sharing your opinions, etc., will likely become a lot more clear as we are, returning back to regularly scheduled programming, with Mercury now being direct and moving forward with progressive action. On the 16th of December, the Sun in Sagittarius is going to square Saturn in your Pisces 12th house. So this is a sort of similar energy that we had to December 8th, meaning that, Mars wants to go on the 8th, right? Saturn gets in its way and stops it. On the 16th, now with the Sun happening here, you want to sort of confront where you feel like you might not be able to be happy, or believe that you cannot be happy or comfortable or stable or successful or doing well in regards to your perspective, like where you believe that these things are not being met. because of mental blockages, or because of things that you are psychologically limiting yourself to, or because of things that are maybe like unresolved pain or residual traumas, or even like illness or fatigue, or things that are maybe indeficiencies with your health that have been preventing you in order to feel that way. So there could be some sort of confrontation or hard point or sobering sort of realization that occurs on this day as well in relation to that. On the 19th, there's going to be a new moon in Sagittarius in your 9th house at 28 degrees. So if we look at the chart of that, this is actually going to be in a conjunction to both Venus in Sagittarius and then Mars in Capricorn. So I'm actually very excited for this new moon. It's exciting. You're planting a seed in that 9th house of a traveling, faith, philosophy, education, your broader perspective, perhaps more opportunities to travel, to use your voice, to share your opinions, to do any sort of writing, publishing, any sort of education, whether you are the student or you're the teacher, or you're engaging with some sort of mentor or some sort of life direction that's kind of opening up the world to you. And you're going to see this sort of manifest over the span of the next 6 months as we get to the full moon in Sagittarius, which is going to be in the spring of 2026. So you will see that come full culmination, but you'll likely see with the following 2 weeks after the new moon. So on the 19th onward through the remainder of December, some things sort of turning in your favor in regards to that area of the chart. And I like seeing it in a combination to both Mars and Capricorn. Again, this relentless pursuit to go after what you want, very locked in, very driven, very determined. And then Venus and Sagittarius being very, very vast and open-minded and exploratory, and really touches on themes of like manifestation, like believing it before you can see it, bringing something to life. You know, the world is your oyster, the sky is the limit, thinking very big in this way. So at the very worst, there could be some over optimism with some people, but I don't think that that's a bad thing, as long as you also have this combination of being rooted in reality and practicality, which Mars in Capricorn is pretty good at. So this is going to be an exciting new moon for you. On the 20th, Venus in Sagittarius in your 9th house is then going to square Saturn and Pisces in your 12th house as well. So we have 3 points throughout the month where 3 different planets come into contact with a square. So a little bit of a frustrating aspect to Saturn, again, in that 12th house of your psychology, your mental health, what's going on internally. It's everything that we can't see or touch, but that we can feel. So that first one is going to be on the 8th with Mars squaring Saturn. The second one is going to be on December 16th with the Sun squaring Saturn. And then the third one is going to be December 20th with Venus in the 9th house squaring your Saturn. And then we're also going to see the final and last one of Mercury squaring Saturn on the very last day of the month, on the 30th. So the Venus square Saturn on the 20th can be a little bit more in regards to things like concerning finances, relationships, romance, having to do with like give and take with other people, or compromise, or things being fair, things being balanced, whether that's another person or a different entity or just a separate sort of variable. There can be something around like your comfort zone being breached, or something around your comfortability to feel like leisurely or comfortable in terms of like luxury, feeling a little bit limited or restricted for whatever reason. So to see this sort of what is a minor disagreement or tension between the 9th house and your 12th house. The 9th house is, again, your opportunity. It's the world opening up to you. It's, the sky's the limit. And then the 12th house is all of those mental blockages or barriers or things that kind of happen behind closed doors and behind the scenes that we can't always identify, kind of getting in the way or blocking something. So there's like a repeated lesson here that we're having to confront, that only you will know better about, that is happening between the 9th and the 12th house. And squares don't always have to be the worst thing in the world, but they create discomfort, and our best, assumption, the discomfort can be seen as an opportunity, as you can get so uncomfortable that you're inspired to finally do something about the discomfort, or to confront it, or to make a decision, or to make a change that ends up, kind of breaking that square and releasing that tension, sort of loosening it and relieving it, liberating it to some degree. So on the 8th, the 16th, the 20th, and the 30th, note that those days might feel a little bit more tense and tight, but that there's an opportunity there for you to confront whatever that tightness is in order to relieve yourself of it and find a way out. On the 21st, the sun is going to ingress into your Capricorn 10th house. So everything's really going to start to move in there. Then on the 24th, just a few days later, Venus is going to join the party. So we're really seeing a lot of stimulation in your career sector towards the end of this month. So your career, your public image, your status, your reputation, the way that people perceive you publicly, the way that you present yourself publicly, the way that you sort of stand on your own 2 feet. It's your confidence. If there isn't anything relevant to your career or your profession, if this isn't something, whether you're unemployed or you just just don't have to work, or you're just not seeing any major changes happening at your job. This can have something to do with your confidence and the way that you carry yourself throughout the world, and the way that you sort of lead your own personal legacy while you're still here. So there can be an importance around your public image or your status, or the way that you sort of move through the world this month. That becomes a little bit more prominent as we get towards New Year's. And then again, we end the month on the 30th with Mercury and Sagittarius creating a little bit of discomfort to Saturn in Pisces. So I really want you to pay attention to your subconscious mind and what's going on mentally, what you're thinking, what stories you're telling yourself this month, as they will likely manifest and kind of become true for you. And that's not to scare you and tell you that if you are struggling with your mental health or paranoia or any sort of, horrifying fears or anything like that, that by thinking about them, they're going to come true. But rather that if you are functioning from a place of limiting beliefs and really starting to tell yourself those looping stories over and over again, they're going to cement and become a little bit more permanent in your mind. And I want to try to give you the encouragement to prevent that before it gets out of hand. So really try to be careful with the way that you speak to yourself internally this month, to speak to yourself, the way that you would to a child that you really care about. That way you can sort of see the positive results of being very aware of your thoughts and observing them. Meditation would be great right now, or journaling, therapy, rather than the negative aspects. And that is your month, Aries. I'm excited for you. We are closing out such a big year. I feel like it went by so fast and so slow, but I'm excited to talk to you guys in 2026. Thank you for listening, and thank you for trusting me.